Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today on day 2 of Shadowlands Alpha Watch, Blizzard released some class notes today. I guess you can say class notes, sort of, talking about new returning abilities that classes are going to see in Shadowlands. So today, I want to take the time and talk about those new and/or returning abilities for Warlocks specifically, as well as the Covenant class-based abilities for Warlocks, and what they could potentially mean, certain interactions, things like that, with each spec. Now, I do want to emphasize here that this is the very first iteration of Alpha. We haven't even gotten the first client yet. Invites haven't even gone out for the first iteration of Alpha. Like, we haven't actually had a chance to even play the game yet. So the further we get into the video, you'll see some specs. One spec probably seems like it's favored a bit more than the other two as far as Warlocks go. Keep in mind, this is very early alpha. Abilities are still going to be coming. Abilities are going to be taken away. There's going to be new abilities, tuning, tweaking. It's all still going to take place. So keep that in mind. And don't be frustrated if the spec that you play or you prefer, something along those lines, might not seem like it got the same amount of attention and or abilities that certain specs did. Keep that in mind. It's really early in alpha. So yeah, if you want to join me on stream anytime to discuss this even more, I'll put a link to my Twitch somewhere on the screen down below here. I do stream 5 to 6 days a week, so feel free to swing by anytime and discuss this or other topics. Okay, now we're looking at actual class-specific abilities, mainly being for Warlocks here, for the Covenants. I can show you right now that Night Fae, their Covenant ability for Warlock is still a work in progress. Druids, Death Knights, and Demon Hunters do have Night Fae-based abilities. Let's be honest, Demon Hunters have basically everything in this game at this point. But for most classes outside of those three, there might be a fourth. Night Fae is still a work in progress Covenant-wise. Regardless, we did know about the first ability here, Scouring Tithe, at BlizzCon, but we did not know about Impending Catastrophe, or Decimating Bolt. So let's get into Scouring Tithe here first and just talk about what it sort of entails. It deals arcane damage instantly and an additional arcane damage over time. Now, if we take the initial form of this from BlizzCon, the damage over time, the dot as Scouring Tithe applies, was initially 18 seconds. If the enemy dies while affected by Scouring Tithe, you generate additional soul shards. Now, at BlizzCon, those soul shards, you generated 5, which is pretty impactful for both Destruction, Demonology, and Affliction. Let's be honest here. We know how strong Baleful Invocation is. If they survive, this is the really interesting part. If they survive, Scouring Tithe's cooldown is refreshed. Now, initially I thought that said reset, but refreshed to me sort of implies that if they don't die while this effect is active, it goes back on CD. And the baseline CD for this ability was 40 seconds at BlizzCon. So if they survive when the dot expires, you don't get to initially cast it again. It's on CD for 40 seconds again. So this actually makes this ability a lot more interesting to me. It allows for a lot more min-maxing. It sort of feels like Shadowburn meets Baleful Invocation meets like, you know, Bestial Wrath has a CD reset for BM Hunter or something like that, right? Regardless, it's really interesting. It's going to reward tight play, even though the dot does last 18 seconds. On bosses and things at times, like, you're going to want to try and min-max your uptime here. Let's say there's ad spawning on Hive Mind, for example. Take a boss out of Ny'alotha. You're going to want to deal max damage to them within reason. And obviously, you want them to die within a certain period of time to get those 5 shards back and not have an increased CD on your Scouring Tithe. The interesting thing, though, is when are you going to cast this? Are you going to cast it early on for that extra damage and the extra dot damage over the course of their lifespan to try and kill them faster? Or do you want to hold it for a while to guarantee they die while the dot is active and get those 5 shards back? That's the really interesting part there. And there's a lot of min-maxing with this Covenant-based ability. It's really cool. I like this. And it sort of is like a pseudo single target, but also has some kind of AoE/multi-target implications. Obviously, if this means the ability is not reset whenever the mob dies, I'm pretty sure it's not what it means. Then it loses some value, but hey, 5 soul shards is a lot for Demonology, for Destruction, and Affliction. So we'll have to see where this goes. I like this ability, though. Remember, in the last thing we saw from BlizzCon, the damage over time effect is 18 seconds long. It did initially give us 5 soul shards back, and it had a baseline 40-second CD. This might be changed, but the last known information was exactly that. Looking at Venthyr, Impending Catastrophe calls forth a cloud of chaotic anima that travels to the target enemy. enemy, singular, not multiple, singular enemy, dealing shadow damage to enemies within their path. When the enemy reaches their target, it explodes, inflicting a random curse and dealing shadow damage to all nearby enemies. I'm going to be honest, I just read that the first time there. So there's not much we know about impending catastrophe. We don't know what curses it can like apply. I imagine it's weakness, recklessness, doom, and tongues. It could be more though. We don't really know. We're not totally sure to what actual extent we're getting back curse-wise, or if there's even new curses in general. Regardless though, so it sort of feels like, I mean, it sort of feels like the charge that we have in King's Rest. It's on one fixated target. However, any enemies that it comes in contact with over the duration of it traveling to that enemy take damage. So this is sort of a pseudo single target ability, but it has a bit of a living bomb kind of feel to it. It's pretty cool. It's going to be interesting to see how it interacts with multiple mobs Mythic Plus in a tight stack. Like, what's the range on like both sides of a traveling effect? Is it just whatever it hits directly in a straight line, or does it hit or pulsate on enemies within 5-6 yards of each side of it? There's a lot to see with this ability. It's cool though in dealing shadow damage to all nearby enemies. So this is more of an AoE based ability for sure than the Kyrian one, and obviously a lot of it depends on the curse and things like that. But if it applies a random curse to every single enemy hit, that's going to be really interesting as well. I mean, let's be honest here. Weakness, recklessness, and tongues, they're relevant at certain points in time, but on a large pull, if every single mob that it hits, it applies a random curse to, or even doom, that's pretty cool and can actually be pretty impactful when it comes to utility and things in Mythic Plus, depending on what curses it actually can do and apply and entail. So we need to see more about this ability, but it's really cool. And also keep in mind that this Venthyr ability corresponds to Door of Shadows, the baseline Venthyr Covenant, which gives you the pseudo invisibility / blink. So I have to see what both those entail. The third ability we have here, which is essentially the last one because of not having a Night Fae one, is the Necrolord ability called Decimating Bolt. And once again, I haven't really read this until right now, so we're going to read it together. Hurl a bolt of shadow magic at your target, dealing shadow damage and increasing... Okay, I have read a bit of this. I'm sorry. I have read this, duh, obviously. Dealing shadow damage and increasing the damage of your next incinerates, drain souls, or shadow bolts. Decimation Bolt's damage and the bonus Incinerate, Drain Soul, or Shadow Bolt both increases as your target's health decreases. Okay, Decimation Bolt's damage and the bonus to Incinerate, Drain Soul, or Shadow Bolt increases as your target's health decreases. So this is like a pseudo execute. This is really cool because this is actually similar to an ability that I talked about in the video I put out 6 months ago when BlizzCon was over, about abilities I sort of went back as a Warlock. This is almost like Death's Embrace baked into a Covenant. The interesting thing here, though, this is basically a single target ability. You hurl a bolt of shadow magic at your target. There's one target. There's no real AoE implications here, unless we get like baseline fire and brimstone back, and then it can cleave incinerates. But you know what I'm saying. So the really cool thing here, I have to say, I did read a bit of this. I didn't read all of it, which is sort of why it caught me off guard here. It increases the damage of your next incinerate, destruction's filler, shadow bolt, demonology, and affliction's filler, and Drain Soul. Now, I know for BFA there's a lot of experimentation with Drain Soul and Shadow Bolt for Affliction fillers. Incinerate is Destro's main filler. Shadow Bolt is Demo's main filler. If they're mentioning each spec's filler, this could be implying that we're getting Drain Soul back baseline as Affliction. I'm not sure. I don't know, because obviously if you take Drain Soul right now, you can, as the talent in the first row, you have a pseudo execute baked in the Drain Soul, and it just replaces Shadow Bolt. But I have a feeling that I have this sneaking feeling that they wouldn't really mention Drain Soul here if it wasn't the filler. They just put a clause on Drain Soul if it was still a baseline talent. Hey, it replaces Shadow Bolt, and it works with Necrolord Covenants that way. I have a feeling that Drain Soul might be back as our baseline filler. I could be wrong here. We'll see whether this video comes out before or after Shadowlands Alpha, and if we're in or not, if that's actually the case. But that's pretty cool. I have to say that I initially enjoyed Shadow Bolt. It was sort of a change of pace and things from Legion heading into BFA. I can say that I really prefer Drain Soul at this point, whether it has an execute baked into it or not. Just the actual playstyle of Drain Soul, shard sniping, the periodic damage, ticking damage of a channel. There are so many times Mythic Plus when I was playing Affliction in like 8.0, and even now when we're memeing with keys on stream, that I'm in the middle of casting a Shadow Bolt, but I have to move for an ability, and 3/4 of that cast finish, and guess what? I had to move, and that Shadow Bolt didn't go off. And there's travel time with that too. Drain Soul, there's periodic ticks. Okay, interrupt the Drain Soul. Cool, I got 2 out of 4 ticks off regardless. Guess what? That amounts to 2% health. Tab back to it. Take a Soul Shard off it. Get 1/8 of a second of a cast in. You got a Soul Shard off it. Shadow Bolt's not going to do that. I feel a Drain Soul just feels a lot better as Affliction's filler, for whatever spec. A channeled ability that gives resources back, it feels really good. So I think it's a bit of foreshadowing there. I'm not sure. I haven't read through the rest of the class-based abilities, but I think there's a bit of foreshadowing there. We could see Drain Soul back for Affliction. But regardless, this ability does seem really strong. It's single target based, and it also does accompany the Fleshcraft ability, which gives you, remember, it forms a shield of bone and flesh whenever you use the ability equal to your max, a portion of your maximum health. It's the ability that when you're standing next to a corpse, you get a larger health shield back. It's interesting. It might be semi-relevant, but in the end, I feel like these actual Covenant signature abilities, the not class-specific ones, they're relevant. The Vanther one could be very relevant if it's an invis, from Mythic Plus especially. But what it's really going to come down to is the tuning of these abilities, because we don't know what the Night Fae one is here. Looking at other class-based ability ones for Night Fae, like Druid has... I don't want to look at Druids because it's going to be a disaster. Let's look at Demon Hunters, for example. They have an ability called the Hunt, charge to an enemy, inflicting nature damage and rooting them. The target's marked for a period of time, increasing your fury from Demon's Bite and Shear against them. You may reactivate the Hunt every 30 seconds to teleport behind the marked target and ignore line of sight. That sounds insane. That actually sounds insane. But that's more so single target based, right? But if you look at the Death Knight Night Fae ability, it replaces Death and Decay, and it corrupts the targeted ground, causing shadow damage over a duration of time. Targets, plural, within the affected area. Enemies deal reduced damage to you, and their power is transferred to you as an equal amount of strength. When you remain in the area, your Necrotic Strike, Heart Strike will hit additional targets. Scourge Strike and Clawing Shadows will hit all enemies near the target. That's pretty insane. That is like... It just sounds fun to play with. But it's pretty big AoE based, right? Obviously, the damage reduction dealt to you is relevant at times too, but... So, Night Fae is not just limited to single target based abilities. It can also be AoE based abilities too. So, I'm curious to see what Warlocks get here. Because, for the most part... Scouring Tithe is single target based. You can use some of the resource off it, sure, but it's mostly single target based. And when it comes to Impending Catastrophe, that is our best AoE based ability right now. And yeah, it has a lot of potentially big AoE implications, but it depends a lot on what curses it can apply, how much damage it deals, what's the range of the traveling projectile when it comes to like hitting mobs on the left and right side of it. A lot of it depends on that, because Decimating Bolt, once again, is a single target ability. It has an execute built into it. Like, it's going to be cool to see, but I'm sort of wondering what Night Fae is going to have, because it's going to be times where, even in Mythic Plus, or a rating more so, you're going to want that Necro Lord single target Decimating Bolt ability for the execute damage, the baseline increase to Incinerate, Drain Soul, and Shadow Bolt. And there's going to be times on AoE based fights in Mythic Plus, or even rating, where that Venthyr ability is going to be really relevant. And if that's the case, it's going to put you in a weird spot. I was talking about this a bit earlier on Twitter as well, that it really depends a lot on what the cost is going to be trying to transfer from one covenant to another. If it's something like the Reforged system we have now for Azerite, where, hey, okay, pay 100 gold, then 200, then 400, 800, whatever, and it resets weekly, I think a weekly reset is better for that regardless. That's pretty cool. That wouldn't be that restrictive, but if it's something like an Aldor Scryer grind, or something that takes a week or two to grind out, the higher end raiding guilds, and in the higher plus groups more so, you're just going to play multiple Warlocks. You're going to play multiple Mages, multiple Hunters, multiple whatevers. And it's not even like I'd be surprised if that's the case. When it comes to the higher end raiding scene, I'd be surprised if that's not the case. So the question is Blizzard going to take that into account when it comes to the race to world first and just higher end mythic rating in general? Because we still don't know if Hall of Fame is going to be a thing, but obviously they take higher end rating into account at certain times. So that's going to be really interesting to see. But overall, Decimating Bolt seems really cool, and Pending Catastrophe seems really awesome with it applying curses to mobs that it hits, or even just a curse in general, that if it hits one target, if that one target, if that's the only mob that gets a curse, it's still cool. It's awesome. And the flavor is there, especially for the Venthyr abilities. And honestly, Scouring Tithe has a lot of room for min-maxing. So I'm really excited for these abilities. Hopefully we can see more when it comes to Alpha. Hopefully we get an early first wave or so. And hopefully the Nightbait ability comes soon as well, because I sort of want to see if there's another AoE-based ability. Let's be honest here. I really want to see how many Warlocks I have to level for Shadowlands. Now, I have to admit, I really only intended on talking about Warlock Covenant-based abilities in this video. As you can see, my shirt has changed. The first part of this video was recorded yesterday with the intent of putting it up on YouTube tonight. However, today, Blizzard has also released a decent bit of new abilities or changing abilities for Warlocks, every class in general. So I figured this would be a great time to review those here as well. Now, I will say, this is the very, very, very first, I don't even know if I want to say build, iteration of Alpha that we've seen. Alpha's not even out yet. There are many, many abilities that are going to change that haven't even been talked about, that probably are here right now in game, that are going to be removed before Alpha and Beta is over and Shadowlands actually releases. So I will say, when we talk about these, Affliction does indeed seem to have gotten the best deal here so far for initial class changes and stuff. Keep that in mind. It's Alpha. Things are going to change a whole lot. All right, with that being said, let's take a look. So all Warlock specs, obviously, like we know, are receiving the following baseline abilities: Curse of Doom, Curse of Tongues, Curse of Recklessness, Curse of Weakness, and Demonic Circle. I guess a 5. Demonic Circle is going back baseline, which is awesome. So we're going to have to find something to fill in that talent row there. We also are getting a baseline ability, I believe here. I thought it initially referred to being under the Affliction tree, but apparently it's just baseline across every spec. It's a new talent called Tongue-Tied. It empowers spells cast on a target with Curse of Tongues active, causing them to seal, and they put seal in, quotations here, the victim from receiving healing effects, forcing them to succumb to all incoming damage for a moderate amount of time. There's a million questions here. I don't know what a moderate amount of time entails in WoW. The real question here, though, is what does sealing an enemy mean? Because they could have just worded this like a maledict. It could just be they have an absorb on them that you have to heal through to break and you can heal them again. The word seal, when you seal something, it makes me like nothing gets in. A watertight seal. It seems like the actual seal of this ability is going to prevent them from receiving any healing for the entire duration of the ability. Now, it can probably be dispelled and things as well, or but regardless, this could be really powerful depending on what's going on, especially in PvP. I initially thought the seal was like a maledict, where yeah, there's an absorb, you have to heal it off. If it's a full-on, they can't be healed, okay. We're gonna see. And the cool thing is, every single spec gets that. It's baseline, apparently. So we'll see. Really interesting. Hopefully we can play with it soon when Alpha comes out and go from there. Now, getting into these spec-specific abilities here. For Affliction, number 1, Unstable Affliction no longer stacks on the target. Unstable Affliction now lasts for longer and no longer consumes a soul shard. So there's a few questions here. First of all, what are we going to spend soul shards on for Affliction? Don't really know. Number 2, what is the actual duration of Unstable Affliction? Because it seems like we also, I guess number 3, don't know if it has the bonus 10% damage effect baked into it like it does currently in BFA. It'd be cool if it does. It's nice to have around, and it promotes tight play, permanent uptime on Unstable Affliction, things like that. It seems like it's going to be one of our just maintenance dots. You refresh it when it's about to fall, similar to Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, and UA has a cast time on it. Even though it doesn't stack, I imagine you can probably clip them. So I would imagine it's probably in some form of like just wanting a perma uptime and bringing that pseudo 10% buff with it. But who knows? We'll see. It's interesting, and it also affects one or two new spells coming up here a decent bit. In case you don't know, Sow the Seeds, talent-wise, now embeds 2 additional seeds in Seed of Corruption. So I'm 99.9% sure here it's being reverted back to the way it was in Legion, to plant 3 total seeds in the target. The way it's worded, it can be interpreted like it says 2 additional seeds. Is that additional on top of the 2 it already plants now in BFA for a total of 4, or is it 3? I'm 99.9% sure it's 3. It's probably going back to the way it was in Legion. Cool. Awesome. So the seeds, barring damage tuning, is back in a sense. The new ability here, which is really interesting, really cool for Affliction. This might be a pseudo fix to our AoE burst, lack of AoE burst damage here. Malefic Rapture. Deals damage to all enemies afflicted by their periodic spells, increased for each periodic effect on the target. Enemies, plural. So, obviously, I haven't seen this. Alpha's not out yet. Nothing like that. I could be way wrong here, way off. Well, I guess we'll see in a few days if I get in or not, or regardless, people will be playing it. But this makes me think of like a Shadow Priest when they enter Void form, and they AoE around on all the mobs around them. It sort of feels like a Death Bolt-esque ability that meets that. It's really cool. So essentially, like, you, in a trash pack from Mythic Plus, you probably open on precasting and Steed Corruption, get your Agonies rolling. You're probably not playing Siphon Life, but get your Unstable Afflictions rolling. And the fact that it doesn't stack anymore means, 1 on each target. And Unstable Affliction also lasts longer, it says. We don't know the full duration of this, but if you play with Affliction recently, in Mythic Plus, like 4, 5, 6 mob pulls, it's a bit hard to get your Corruption rolling, your Agonies rolling, all your Unstable Afflictions rolling, your Singularity, and go into your Dark Lair before things start expiring. That probably won't be an issue anymore. We'll see, obviously, but get your Corruptions rolling, your Agonies rolling, whatever dots you have still, if Singularity's thing, your UAs, Malefic Rapture. And that could be an insane amount of damage. It's worded in a way that it appears to function like that. So, really interesting. Gonna see where that goes, but it sounds awesome. And once again, I could be way off here, but it sounds pretty legit. I'm pretty excited and happy for it. There were some abilities that were listed early on. When I first woke up, I saw this. I woke up at 2 p.m. today, so sorry, dude. It had been out for a little while. I didn't actually get a chance to screenshot them, but I believe there was some ability, and if you guys actually know what it was, let me know in the comment section below. I believe it was an ability called, like, Rack, something like that, that it was, people mentioned it on stream a good bit, that it increased the rate that your dots tick, something along those lines. From what people were describing, it sounded like it's a pseudo, like, CD you hit and your dots tick faster over a period of time. I'm not really sure. Apparently, it was removed from the class description that in the post that Blizzard put out. So, yeah. But I think there might have been something else for Affliction, too. But regardless, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So I think Affliction looks really good. Obviously, we don't know if Drain Soul is going to be the filler, but we can sort of maybe see the hint at that from Covenants and things. Somebody also mentioned that it could, because we talked about previously in the video here, one of the Covenants buffing Incinerate, Shadow Bolt, and Drain Soul's damage with, I think it's the Death Bolt ability they launched, whatever it is. Somebody pointed out that Drain Soul could come back the way it used to be when a target's in execute range, you're able to cast Drain Soul, but until you hit that point, you cast Shadow Bolt. It's cool. There's a lot we need to see. But that's Affliction. Looks pretty good. Demonology and Destruction, once again, like I mentioned, this is the very first iteration of Alpha. It hasn't even come out yet. So keep it in mind. Demonology, the first ability, I guess, here that's being changed. Dark Pact. It says it now scales with spell power to deal more damage than ever before on Wowhead. Blizzard put out an article updating it. They are referring to Dark Pact, the Absorb Shield talent. They corrected the, I guess, text to now absorb more damage than ever before. So Dark Pact is getting a buff, I suppose, there. It's relevant. It's cool. It's not as exciting as new abilities, but it's cool. It's something. I think for the most part, they said that they're relatively mostly happy with where Demonology is. I don't totally agree 100%, but that doesn't mean we're not getting new abilities or different abilities or things are changing. That does not mean we're not getting an interrupt for Demonology. It still can very well be there. I can pretty much say 100% that if and when we log on to Alpha, there's going to be abilities and talents and things that have been moved around or whatever that Blizzard didn't mention in his post that we get to see. So they're also changing Dark Fury as a talent. I guess it's just for Demonology, actually. I don't know why. I think it's a talent at every spec, right? Yeah? I guess so. Dark Fury, which is the talent that affects Shadow Fury's cooldown, also increases the area of effect. I think it also gives a new visual as well. I don't really know. These two abilities are everything we heard for Demonology. I will say it's a bit lackluster compared to Affliction. which gets a big change to UA, a whole new ability, and a reversion of Sow the Seeds, which we've been asking for a while, but it is cool. It's something. I don't think like the range on Dark Fury needs to be increased. I don't think it's going to make a massive difference. I really don't think so. I think it's Shadow Fury has a large enough radius that you're able to hit all targets you want with it. But regardless, hey, whatever. It's something. Maybe the visual is cool. Maybe they can tie in some damage to it. I don't really know. But that's that. And I imagine we'll see some more changes in the first few builds of Alpha and things like that. So Destruction has one change. Fire and Brimstone. Now, I do want to say, in the video I put out like 5 months ago talking about hopeful changes for Destruction, or for locks in general in Shadowlands, Fire and Brimstone was mentioned in that video, as well as Hellfire and things like that. But this article here on Wowhead says that Fire and Brimstone is a talent. In the actual post Blizzard put out, they did not cite Fire and Brimstone being a talent in any way, shape, or form. Now, it is currently, and I get why Wowhead put its talent here, and they're probably right. I mean, because the fact that Blizzard didn't mention it not being a talent means it probably still is a talent. I wanted it to go baseline, but regardless, Fire and Brimstone now generates 2 Soul Shard fragments for each additional enemy struck by the Warlock's Incinerate. So it's a buff to the resource generation. Unfortunately, that's not really the issue with Fire and Brimstone now, within reason. Fire and Brimstone deals, when you have it active, when you have it on, it deals full damage to the one target you're hitting, and then 40% incinerate damage to all the targets around that target. The larger issue is that it doesn't deal enough raw damage. Cataclysm is good regardless, it's in the same row. It's great damage-wise. It applies Immolate to 1, 2, 3, 4, 8,000 targets at once, as long as they're standing in the ground-based effect, while also dealing that impact damage. I mean, it's good enough you use it in your single target rotation. So the bigger issue with Fire and Brimstone is that, yes, the generation's nice, but with large enough pulls, you could still go like incinerate rain, and weave things in. It's not that hard to do right now. The bigger issue is it doesn't deal enough damage. So yes, it might fuel more things down the line, but to a certain extent, you're just trying to cap on resources anyways. So I'd like to see Fire and Brimstone go baseline. I think that'd be a lot better for the Destruction toolkit as a whole, because outside of like Havoc Windows and Rain of Fire, which is fine, you don't really have a whole lot of AoE outside of Infernals and Plus. Like you do, but you don't. It's sort of a weird restrictive kind of area. But yeah, so that's all we have for Destruction. Demonology and Destro did sort of get the short end of the stick. I guess sticks, plural here. Affliction looks really good. Demonology and Destruction probably need a little bit of work. Well, I wouldn't say work. There's going to be more. Like I once again want to emphasize here that this is literally the first build of Alpha. I'm totally fine answering questions on stream, but I was literally already getting questions on stream today. I'm not kidding. What is the best spec in Alpha? I have no idea. I have no idea, and I won't know for 8 months. But I'm down to talk about it. It's cool. But just keep in mind that this really, truly is Alpha. It is Alpha. It's going to be a very, very limited test pool. I might get it in the first wave. I might not get it any wave. I have no idea. I hope I'm in the first wave, but realistically, I have no idea. Once again, like I emphasized in the last video I put out, if you're lucky enough to get into Alpha, Beta, whatever, whether it's now or a month from now or 6 months from now, give feedback, report things, test, give feedback, because if you don't give feedback, in a sense, you can't really complain about the game not being good. So that's sort of how I feel. Give feedback. Tell them what feels good, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see back, what you don't. Maybe just give feedback. Give feedback. The bug tool's there. The feedback tool's there. It's there for a reason. Give feedback. So in the end, it's an awesome game. We're there. It's awesome to be in early, but you're also in early for a reason, in hopes that you will give feedback and make the game better as a whole before it launches. Thanks for watching, dudes. I hope this video gave you all a better understanding about the current state of Warlock Covenant class-specific based abilities and how they're really going to interact with specs and things heading into Shadowlands. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, we don't have the Night Fae Covenant, but once we do, or if there's a lot of tuning and changes to these abilities, I'll probably make another video covering them. If not, obviously we'll cover a lot of it on stream and things. So once again, if you guys want any weak auras, profiles, add-ons that I use, they're all available to you for free on my Twitch. A link somewhere right here. Feel free to swing by, drop a follow, hang out on stream if you want. I'll be streaming all of my Shadowlands Alpha content as long as we get in. Well, whenever I get in. As soon as I get in, I'll be streaming all of it, whether it's first wave, second wave, last wave, or we'll see. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, dudes. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more WoW/Warcraft Warlock content, feel free to smash the subscribe button. It helps out a lot. I will see you all again soon. Have a good one, dudes. Peace.